The biggest cool down of the winter so far is on the way as we go towards next week, and this transition will possibly fuel multiple chances for snow that could even include the south. This video has a full hype-free update on what's ahead, all of that coming up in the next 10 minutes. Thank you for taking time out of your day to tune into this update video. I'm going to break down temperatures and all of those changes on the way through the next several days and into next week first. Then later on in the video, I'll discuss how the transition could lead to some snowstorm potentials as we go into the upcoming pattern as well. All that's coming up. Make sure you're using the timestamps in the description if you want to skip to a specific point in this video. But here we go, pushing right along through the rest of this week using this blended guidance that forms your European ensembles. We're looking here at the temperature anomalies from usual. And a color that has not been seen too much on the map as we've gone through January is actually going to show up briefly anyway with a ridge pushing into the central U.S. by the time we go out of Thursday into Friday. Yep, it's some oranges and reds. Temperatures looking to be about 5 to 15 degrees above average, anywhere from Texas and Oklahoma all the way up here to places like Iowa, Minnesota, and up into Wisconsin, where some of the biggest anomalies, at least in comparison to this time of the year, could come from this ridge as we see temperatures again in some of these spots warming up upwards of 10 to 15 degrees above normal. You see that cooler air back up into parts of Montana and Idaho as early as Friday, though. This is going to help in forming our next cold front that's going to work its way into the warmer air, and that's going to lead to an end of the week into the weekend type of storm system. As we go out of Friday into Saturday, that's going to push east along the transition zone as we see warmer than average air sliding towards the east coast briefly, cooler than average air coming in behind it. As noted earlier, I'll talk about snowstorm potential more later in the video, but when you have a front pushing east and there's some cooler than average air coming in behind it, especially the further north you go along that front, we could at least see some trailing snow and maybe an additional low pressure try to develop as this pushes towards the east coast in terms of your cool down as we go out of Saturday into Sunday and early Monday. Certainly something we're going to have to track, but the main headline out of this entire cold blast is how cold this is going to be even in comparison to January standards. By the time we go into the afternoon, for example, of our Monday, January 20th, these ensembles, which are usually on the more conservative side because it's a blend of guidance, showing a huge swath of temperatures in these deepish blue shades turning to those magenta shades, anywhere from the Rockies to the Plains to the Mississippi Valley over to the Ohio Valley and even the East Coast by Monday afternoon already. 25 to even 45 degrees below normal for January standards. Is this going to be life-threatening? It certainly will if you don't have good heating, if you don't have good shelter, and of course you want to make sure that you're protecting people, pipes, and pets when temperatures are expected to get this cold. Those are those main things you want to focus on. And the cold looks like it's going to last around for a lot of the country, at least in terms of anomalies through Monday into Tuesday. Eventually, by the time we go towards Wednesday and then into Thursday, looks like the worst of our cooler than average temperatures are now going to be focused down here towards the southern and eastern corridor, starting to relax a little bit as you go further west. But with all this cool air in place down towards the southeast, you got to wonder, could we even see a storm that could ride up through these zones? Certainly something we're going to have to watch because even the Gulf Coast may not have a 0% chance of snow with this type of setup as we go towards next week, because that's really going to be one of the only areas we're actually going to be able to get moisture up into this cool air. I'll break that down, as I've been saying, a little bit more later in the video, but for now, let's break down what some of those day-by-day temperatures could look like for you with this massive cool down. All right, here we go. We want to start in the near term looking at these high temperatures day by day with the National Digital Forecast Database. Here we go into tomorrow, our Wednesday, January 15th. Overall, we're still dealing with the lingering effects here out of the Midwest, into the Ohio Valley, and into the northeastern U.S. from our most recent cool down, as we've still got teens and 20s for highs. A lot of the snow from that winter storm a week and a half ago now still has not melted off as a result of some of these cooler than average temperatures, but that's going to change with that ridge that's going to briefly build up as we go towards the middle to the back half of this week, as these 50s down here in the south central plains are at least going to turn to 40s and 30s as they move further north, and that's going to help in melting some of the snow even on up into parts of the Midwest and Ohio Valley. Let's give you a look at that. As we skip through Thursday, push into Friday, you can really see the warmth that's eventually going to get blasted out of the way by our cool down. We've got 60s pushing to near 70 right along that Gulf Coast corridor, as well as all the way on down here into parts of Florida. Then we've got a big transition zone here through a lot of the central plains, stretching on over to the southeast and parts of even the Ohio and Tennessee valleys, where there's a lot of 40s and 50s in the mix, and we're above freezing as far north as Wisconsin and Minnesota, including Minneapolis over to Milwaukee into our Friday afternoon. But things begin to change into the northern U.S. as early as into our Saturday, as we're going to see that sharp transition, as I mentioned earlier, going from 10, 15, 20 degrees above average, pushing towards 10, 15, 20 degrees below average in the matter of a day up here in the north central U.S. Single digits and teens a common theme in any of these areas where the arrow is pushing from northwest to southeast, out of Montana, into Wyoming, down into Colorado and Kansas, through parts of the Dakotas, into Nebraska, into Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin. These are going to be some of the coldest states where we struggle to get to 20 degrees into our Saturday afternoon. Meanwhile, still holding on to some of that milder air down to the southeast, but that really gets forced out of here, especially as you go into the Ohio Valley and the mid-Mississippi Valley, even into the interior northeast as early as Sunday. And look at how expansive the cold is by Monday. This is going to be one of the coldest days, especially for an expansive region. Let's draw some lines so that you can see the magnitude of this. Anywhere north of this line right here, pushing through parts of even eastern Washington and Oregon, back through the southwest, coming through the Four Corners region, the South Central Plains, down here through parts of the southern U.S., the southern Appalachians, up into the mid-Atlantic. Around and north of this line, you are not expected to crack freezing for a high as a result of this Arctic blast into our Monday afternoon. Around and north, especially of this line right here, generally many spots are going to have trouble getting out of the teens, again, for the peak temperature in the day. This is not even your morning low for these folks. And then on up here as you come through, again, some of the states I just mentioned in a minute ago, up here into the eastern Rockies, coming up into the north central plains and the upper Midwest. This is where this cold is especially going to be most intense Sunday into Monday into Tuesday. Some spots not even getting out of the 0 degree mark. Into the afternoon hours of a day like Monday, wind chills are going to be much colder than this, some spots even below negative 20, negative 30, dare I say negative 40. I'll break that down more in a future update, but for now, let's talk about some of those snowstorm potentials that could come during the transitions. Alright, this is a blend of guidance that forms your future radar for your GFS ensembles. Pretty much the best future radar guidance you can look at because it's not just a single model, it's a bunch coming together into this ensemble mean, and it shows where rain and snow can generally be anticipated out of various systems as we push through the future. Let's run through what could be coming as we go through the next 7 to 10 days, starting off with the pretty boring near term. Other than this area right here as we come into parts of Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, eastern Kentucky, into West Virginia, parts of Pennsylvania, and western New York, where we're going to get yet another Clipper system in a series that's been moving through, bringing some snow as we go into our Thursday. We don't really have much going on in the overall pattern as we're going to continue to briefly warm up to finish this week while we remain dry during that same time frame out of Thursday into Friday from the central to the southeastern U.S. When things begin to get a little bit active, though, is as we go out of Friday into Saturday, and whether you're looking at these blended ensemble guidance pieces like this, or if you're looking at single models, they're indicating a pretty broad area with a decent chance for rain breaking out up the Mississippi Valley from the lower to the mid part of it anyway, into the Ohio Valley. Maybe even some stronger thunderstorms could get going with this as we go out of Friday into Saturday, especially when you've got some of that warmer air down there towards the mid-south. Overall, not much snow is expected out of the cold front itself, but we could still see a little bit of tailing snow beginning somewhere around this corridor coming out of Missouri into Illinois up into Indiana and Michigan. Would it accumulate to much? No, but this entire band of possible snow is going to continue to follow this front and push with it to the east as we go out of Saturday into Sunday, trailing a lot of some of the spots that get at least some light to moderate rain initially with this system. You'll see that in Ohio and Indiana as we go throughout the day here on our Saturday. Notice we turn from rain to snow in those zones, getting some snow as well through the day Saturday, more than likely up here into the interior northeast. But this is a thin corridor, and it doesn't look like any sort of major snowstorm. A snowstorm, yes. A major one, not really for a lot of these zones, and even the lake effect isn't going to be too extreme necessarily out of this particular system based on current guidance. Meanwhile, notice from southern New England back down to the mid-Atlantic and the southeast U.S., looking from rain, transitioning back towards heavier thunderstorms the further south you go along the warmer side of this front. But even on up there into the mid-Atlantic and the northeast, we may get a chance for snow. Notice by the time we go here into the early afternoon Sunday time frame, these GFS ensembles are indicating something might be trying to push closer to the coast, maybe even with an additional low pressure trying to form on the back end of our front into this general zone. So we'll have to watch and see if we could get a quick hitting snowfall type of system even into these zones. It might bring you a bit of a surprise Sunday into Monday there, closer to the I-95 corridor, even as you push out of parts of Virginia into the Delmarva region, up into southern New England. We'll have to keep a close eye on that. But then from there, we're looking cold and dry based on this guidance with, very, very cold high pressure from the Arctic. That's why it's called an Arctic blast coming down here into the north central U.S. When you get so cold, it is almost impossible to get snowstorms this far north. When temperatures are in the negatives, you're not seeing any sort of moisture as the dew points and humidity levels are so suppressed into these regions. But you know where that forces your snow chance to possibly be as we go towards next week? We could have a better chance of snow towards the Gulf Coast into Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday timeframe than we have up towards parts of the north central U.S. It looks like something might try to originate around Texas and then send energy eastward here towards maybe Georgia and the Carolinas. This is not a forecast, this is a signal. And let's go ahead and briefly look at the total forecast snowfall using European ensembles, a little bit of different guidance, see if they're lining up with the GFS, and also we can kind of start pinpointing some of those areas more in the near term that are going to get some of those snow totals. Here we go as we go through the weekend with that snow that could come for some into the northeast U.S. in particular. Notice as you come out of the Midwest into the Ohio Valley, we start to see dusting to a couple of inches of snow coming out of parts of Illinois, Indiana, and Kentucky into the eastern parts of Indiana, into Ohio, Michigan. And then as you push here into parts of the interior northeast, a lot of spots getting at least a few inches of snow, some maybe more, as that front's going to slide east into the weekend. Totals are a little more uncertain. That's why you see grays on this blended guidance, but I think we could definitely get a couple inches or more in some spots, even as you push towards the coast, depending on where that possible extra low pressure lines up out of Sunday into Monday into the northeast. And then let's see if these European ensembles on their total snowfall are indicating anything or any signals down towards the south, and boy are they. Look at that. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, somewhere in there. I think especially on Tuesday, Wednesday, we see something try to transition over here from Texas to the southeast, and it could be a big snowstorm if these guidance pieces continue to line up like this. It's certainly something we're going to have to watch, but that's all I can tell you in terms of the signal for this video, and that leads me into the recap. Of course, one of the big things I talked about in this video was that we're going to have that cold front ushering in the Arctic blast with that quick storm as we go to the end of this week into the upcoming weekend. Rain for some, but we will see snow as you go further north out of that particular system. Then we get into the coldest air of winter, and that could lead to a southern snowstorm. I'll be keeping you updated on all of it if you're subscribed to my channel right down below. I'm on the way to 10,000 subscribers. I'd love it if you'd be one of them, and stay tuned for all of my consistent, accurate, and educational updates in the future. But for now, make sure you're checking out the link for Weather Bell in the description to this video, and I'll see you next time at
One Nation Weather.